Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Zander Sprague, and I am so excited to have you here. We have an awesome show planned for you today, and I want to start off with the thought of the day. Ask for help. So often as entrepreneurs or just as adults, we're trying to figure something out and we're struggling with it. And there's no need to. There's no need to spin for hours about how to solve something. Because I can tell you that I've done that, and then when I go out to my community and I ask, hey, does anyone else know how to do it? I often get the answer very quickly. And it doesn't have to be difficult. It's okay to ask for help. And in fact, on your epic journey, you're probably going to need some help. So it's important for you to make sure that you ask for help. You're going to find that the answers come quickly, and then you haven't wasted hours looking for a simple answer that frankly someone else had already figured out for you. I've got an epic update for you. A little while ago I interviewed Angelina Anderson. Now, if you don't remember who she is, she's a professional soccer player. She's a goalie for FC Angel City, and there's some exciting updates. First of all, she just went to her first national camp as a goalie for the U.S. women's national team. That has been a dream of hers for as long as she can imagine, and I couldn't be more excited for her. She has also just signed a contract extension with FC Angel City, so she will continue to be playing there, and she is very excited about that. I am so proud of Angelina for all that she's done and how she's pursuing her epic dreams. I am so excited to welcome Jordan Cotumelio, who is so dynamic. I've known Jordan now for 4 years, and she is a real estate agent. She's a mom. She's done so much. So Jordan, welcome. Tell us a little about who you are and what you do.
Oh man. Thank you for having me, by the way. I'm really excited for you, and I'm excited to be here. So I'm a mom, first off, of 4 children. All the way, I have a daughter who's 16, I have a son who's 14, I have a son who's almost 8, and then a son who's almost 2.
Wow.
So, and then I happened in my day job to be a real estate agent. And I say day job a little bit sarcastically because that doesn't turn off, which I'm happy about. So trying to balance all of that is a challenge, but I feel like I'm thriving in this environment. I like to be busy, and both of those tasks allow me to be busy.
That's great. So how long have you been a real estate agent, and how did you get into real estate?
So I got my license in 2015, and I had, I was going through a divorce at the time, and I was actually a dental assistant for many years. I think I was a dental assistant starting in 2001, right after high school. And I loved it. I was in the oral surgery. I stood all day long. And with that comes my body just feeling like it was breaking down at a very young age. And so I thought, I've got potential to do something that utilizes my people skills, caring about people, especially in stressful situations like a surgery room. I knew that I wanted to be able to utilize that in some other capacity in a stressful life situation for people, and be able to genuinely not only be really good at my job, because that's the perfectionist in me, but to be able to help them in those circumstances feel like not only that they're making the right choice, but being able to listen to them and hear their concerns. I think it's become a vital part of myself in this real estate world, because it's a very human experience to buy a home. It can be a scary process. My goal In fact, I just met with a client yesterday for the first time, and I told them, my goal is to make this much less scary for you. I'm not going to lie, you'll feel nervous at times, but my ability to walk you through this is the ultimate goal.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I believe in full disclosure. Jordan was the real estate agent who sold me my beautiful house that I live in now. And that was an interesting time because we were just coming out of COVID.
Right.
And so there were all kinds of new rules about how you could show a house, and only one at a time, and stuff. One of the things I know from having bought a few houses, sometimes the process is overwhelming, and certainly all the papers you have to sign when you go to the closing. How do you talk your clients through that and help them understand? And if you haven't bought a house but really want to, what do people need to know, Jordan, about all of those papers? Because I was like, I honestly don't know how much. Like, what am I signing away? Disclosure for earthquake zone, disclosure for fire zone, disclosure for all of that.
Yeah, I would say that part of the process early on is looking through the disclosures, and I consider myself your advocate. A home buyer is looking at what the seller is giving them paperwork wise. And, there's laws surrounding that it should be the legal material disclosures. But my job is also to explain to buyers that it's also our job to help you investigate everything about this potential home. And so my part in that, in helping a buyer understand what they're looking at, is to be as honest as I can about the things that are top tier, middle tier, and then these are just general forms, right? That everyone would get. So I feel like I approach it with them that way, that these are the ones specifically about the home. These are maybe the inspection reports, and we'll go over that. And then the ones that are just like the Contra Costa general disclosures, so that people can take that in stride and broach it that way, right? Because otherwise it's very overwhelming.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I know one thing I wasn't told, but I should have known more about was when you have your home inspection, the home inspector is going to tell you everything that is not to code. However, I didn't know this because I wasn't told. That's okay. They're just informing you. It doesn't mean that it's wrong, but it could be that this outlet is not to the current code, but you don't have to change it. They're just required to let you know that this doesn't meet the current code. How do you help your clients? Because that is a freak out time for people. Oh my gosh, I'm buying this house, and here in the Bay Area, that's a major financial commitment.
I would say I explain initially whether a buyer is looking at the reports that the sellers provided or we are having an inspection during our inspection time period. I tell them the inspector's job is to call out everything.
Yeah.
They're protecting themselves in the process too,
Sure.
which is a whole different conversation. They're going to call out every little thing. And and also part of that is in our area, a lot of homes are older.
Sure.
So having to explain that to a buyer, when this home was built, this was actually the code, or this was the standard.
Right.
Yes, it currently doesn't maybe meet the standard, but now, you have the option to upgrade. That's not necessarily a repair. So going through that process with them after looking at reports or being at the inspection, and a good inspector should explain that to a buyer too, right? And explain to them, my job is to call out everything. That doesn't mean that you have to touch everything right away.
Yes, absolutely. Now, one thing that happened in the last year or two was there was it was a lawsuit and a settlement about broker fees. And I know people probably have a lot of questions about that, and I would love for you to help my audience understand, what does all of that mean to them? what's changed, what remains the same? What do they need to know?
Yeah, I think that it's much simpler than, to be honest, the media has made it to be. There's been a lot of misconceptions. I mean, you know, even the lawsuit in itself is about misconceptions of what actually was the rule, the law allowed.
Right.
And so the general gist of it, I would say, is that commissions have always been negotiable. They
Sure.
were never set by law. They were not, they of course are not. And that's what the general gist of the lawsuit was, is that some agents have not done a good job explaining to their sellers or their buyers that commissions are always negotiable.
Right.
And so what has come out of it, instead of going into the weeds necessarily about the lawsuit, because I could do that all day, what has come out of it were a couple of things, and they really are in both buyer and seller's favor. You know, it should have kind of always been this way, but you know, what do we do as humans? We change and make things better.
Yep.
So what to know about it? The two really main things that came of it are the MLS was the main portion of the lawsuit, and you know, NAR has kind of had made these rules surrounding what the MLS was, what it, you know, had on it, and what agents had to do to get access to that, and more so that consumers didn't have access to the things that they really should have, and were relying just solely on agents, you know, which can become problematic sometimes. So the MLS now, used to, I should say, have a spot that was just visible for agents to see what the seller was willing to offer a buyer's broker to bring them a buyer.
Okay.
That was in the MLS, not visible to the consumer who didn't have an MLS access, which created all sorts of, you know, antitrust issues. And so part of the lawsuit and the settlement was that the MLS removed that spot. So it's no longer there, which then enables all of it to be done negotiably, right? In an offer, and completely separate from the MLS.
Right.
The second part of it is that a buyer needs to have an understanding of how their agent is actually paid, that they're not working for free, which had been a misconception and something that buyers agents use to their advantage, quite honestly. And so before even going into a home and touring it, a buyer needs to have some sort of a written agreement with their agent and understand that, you know, how their agent's paid, maybe what their agent is charging, although it's always negotiable. But a buyer needs to understand that before going into a home, because, you know, as an agent myself, that's doing work on someone's behalf.
Yeah.
Showing up, getting into the key box, talking to them, researching the home, following up with comparable sales, and all the things that go into that is really doing work for someone on their behalf. So I think it just has added way more clarity for, you know, a lot of people just don't know, and a lot of buyers are first-time buyers. So
and what
good
is
things.
and what is in general the average, you know, sort of commission rate for a house sale? I've always thought 6% is, I've heard. Sometimes if it's a really high-end property, you know, it's selling for 10 or 20 million, it may be more, just because obviously there's a lot of work that goes into, selling a house, period. But when you have a really large price tag, there's considerable more work, I think, that may go into it. You could speak to that.
Some of my lower priced deals have been a lot more work than some of the higher ones. So I mean, the general sense in that, you know, I don't think it necessarily requires more work or less work, the price point or the size home, sometimes, but sometimes not.
Okay.
Essentially, commissions are negotiable, but each agent is allowed to say, okay, well, this is what I charge to represent you, and these are the things I will do for you.
Right.
And, this is where my company that I've been with since 2016, Redfin, shines in that, long before this lawsuit, we have believed in doing things in the consumer's best favor.
Definitely.
And you know this, you were a Redfin buyer.
Yeah.
We have just done things traditionally for less. And, our platform and the way that we are structured with a major team powerhouse behind us allows us to do that. And that's not to discount or say anything against an agent outside of Redfin that might want to charge more for their services.
Right.
They're allowed to do that. We have just always done things a little bit different, which is why I joined the company, is believing that, sometimes giving something back in the transaction if we can, or doing things a little bit less when we list a home. That's what we believe in. So, it's not to say anybody is right or wrong in what they decide to charge or the fees that they earn, but it's all negotiable.
There you go. Now, being in the Bay Area, certainly the media talks a lot about how challenging the housing market is. But as you pointed out, sometimes the media will talk about something and have you believe that it's one way, and when in reality it's not quite so bad. I'll take the weather, right? Sometimes there's, dramatic music and, Stormageddon, and it's they get you all scared, and then you're like, well, we got like a quarter of an inch of rain and not, the floods that were predicted. So talk a little about what our current local real estate market looks like here in Contra Costa County.
Yeah, I mean, it is a healthy market, and the rates are higher than they have been traditionally over the last several years, but it's opened up a lot of opportunities for people that could not compete when the rates were really low.
So you mean the mortgage rates?
The mortgage rates in general. It of course has affected our current market. As far as our biggest challenges or things that I see here locally or in California is homeowners insurance. It's a huge topic right now. It's on everyone's mind for obvious reasons and good reasons. The entire country has to deal with homeowners insurance right now. Every different area of the country has their own challenges with the climate.
Right.
And I feel that, in California in particular, that's been the biggest challenge, and honestly a learning curve. I'm always learning as an agent. And it's been figuring out how to prepare buyers before we even make an offer. Really having them call either, if they're a first-time buyer, their renter's insurance who they use, or their car carrier, and really understanding what the cost of the insurance will, because it plays a role with your interest rate, of course, on your just general budget.
Right.
But the insurance cost, for example, somewhere like La Miranda has extremely high fire insurance costs.
Right.
In addition to the cost of the home being a little bit higher than some other areas. So I think that's been, in my opinion, the current challenge and educating buyers on is how to shop for insurance, check what their costs are going to be, and their risks. Some people aren't as worried about the risks, but some people are.
Definitely. And speaking of the interest rates, it did, when they went up, it made it more challenging for a lot of people to actually be able to afford the home that they wanted, because all of a sudden your payment, let's say your monthly payment went from, I'll just throw out a number, like $2,500. Now all of a sudden with a 7% interest rate, you're at $3,500.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard for people. Are you seeing that people are challenging, perhaps having to buy less house or something than they may have before because they simply don't, it's not in their budget to be able to afford?
It's interesting because I don't know that I've talked to somebody that was looking before and then now is looking. I feel like it is a completely different pool of buyers now. I think that the challenge when rates were low was even being able to get their offer accepted against the pool of buyers. And I
Yeah.
talk about that now with buyers when I meet with them, and I explain that this is actually, believe it or not, a good time to buy because
Okay.
there is less competition. And yes, I agree, it has surely affected the affordability for people, and they've had to make adjustments in their expectations as we're shopping, right?
Definitely.
But I do also think there's an opportunity where people with maybe cash or a ton of money down before when the rates were low were gobbling homes up. There's a different opportunity for people who have been saving for their down payment. The lending world, which, I don't know as much about, but we work closely with lenders, but there's a lot more lending programs that have come about the last couple years. Adjustable rate mortgages particularly have come back as, a attractive option for people who might be able to refinance in a few years,
Right.
and get a lower rate that's more affordable. So, there's a lot of good and bad that's happening right now, but I think honestly more good.
Yeah. I got to tell you this funny story that about a year and a half ago, I got a phone call from the company that has my mortgage. And they're like, "Oh, are you looking to refinance?" Well, I have a really great low rate. And I'm like, "No, because I don't want to pay twice or almost 3 times the rate that I'm currently paying interest rate."
Yep.
So I was like, "Please don't call me." But it was funny. I get someone just calling me, but I was like, did the bank think I was like, "Oh, definitely. Give me a 7% mortgage."
Did you check what I have?
Exactly. How are you seeing local inventory? Because I see in the news a lot, they talk about lack of inventory and stuff. Right now, how is the inventory here in the East Bay?
It's been a tough year for inventory. Most of the sales that we're seeing happen are, maybe estate sales or trust sales. Someone's passed, unfortunately, maybe people going their separate ways, or, in some cases, relocating, right? I would say that's probably more often what I see. But, a lot of people refinanced when the rates were low. And the idea of giving that up to either move up for something bigger or downsize even, in retirement or such, is a challenge because a lot of people are staying put to see what happens.
Definitely.
So I would say, I think that this time last year to this time this year now, we are seeing some inventory pickup. I think people are getting used to the conditions, higher rates. If they're going to make a move in their life, I think they're kind of like, okay, well, we're going to do it anyways. But it's going to be a challenge for a while, the inventory.
Right. And I mean, that's not a new story here in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
It's very popular for people to want to live here.
Right.
I know I have friends who live in different parts of the United States and like, "Oh my gosh, your home prices are ridiculous." And I'm like, I don't disagree. However, I was like, understand that lots of people want to live here in the Bay Area, and I gotta say, I don't know why you wouldn't want to live here.
Yeah.
But, and it's interesting, I've been able to travel many places, and I remember years ago I was in Houston, and I was going in between campuses where I was teaching some software. And we drove through a neighborhood, and I just said, "Oh," and there were like sort of these McMansion starter castle, just this huge house. And I was like, "Oh, what did those go for?" "Oh, those are really expensive. Those are like $300,000. And I was like, "Oh my gosh."
I'll buy it right now.
And then, and like, "Is that a lot?" I'm like, I couldn't even get a garage space in San Francisco for $300,000. Do you forecast that there'll be more inventory coming up if people are looking to, buy a home coming up?
I hope so. I think that I think people will start making some moves that they've been holding off on. There's a lot of new construction, you know. There's a lot of moving east. I just went to a listing consult the other day in Mountain House. Tons of new builds, you know, there. And I do think that is the goal, right? I know it's the goal of California. I think across the country, we understand there's a housing shortage or an affordability factor involved as well. And that's something that us Californians, as you just mentioned, you know, we're a little bit numb to. We just, you know, and I've talked to people and know of people that have left for various reasons over the years. I'm getting out of California. And then, you know, they try to come back and it's darn near impossible because now they've adjusted a lot of their lifestyle to, you know, a state where the costs are lower,
right.
And then to try to come back is
Definitely.
Very challenging.
Very challenging. Jordan, I want to thank you so much for coming in today. It's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you and to learn more about all of the, you know, all of this information about the real estate market, about, you know, how broker rates are negotiable and stuff. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come in and share that information with me and with my audience today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I want to remind everyone that if you want to get a hold of me, if you're ready to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com. If you go there, you'll see all of my social media links. So you can get a hold of me and you can begin your epic journey. I want to remind everyone also that epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.